Vance. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Election day tomorrow in Ohio.
Yeah, that's right, Hugh. Thanks for having me. And, of course, I've endorsed Bernie Moreno. We were rallying with Donald Trump and Bernie on Saturday for tomorrow's election. And I think we got a lot of good energy. So we're just barnstorming across the state today and trying to get as many people out to vote as possible.
Are you going to Warren, JD? Because if you don't go to Warren, it's not really barnstorming.
We are not going to Warren on this trip. No hot dog shopping for
Senator. Tell Bernie he's got to get over there. Let's talk a little bit about that rally on Saturday. I played a lot of the audio in my podcast because the media treated it like Donald Trump called for a bloodbath of his opponents. And, I mean, aren't you sick of this at this point?
Yeah, I'm sick of it, Hugh. It's also just, instead of talking about trade policy or foreign policy, or any of the issues that actually most Americans care about, we need to be discussing in the context of a political debate. We have another hysterical, paranoid media cycle. And I actually just think, Hugh, the voters don't care about this stuff in 2024. They see the media getting hysterical about something Donald Trump says. I think most people, even a lot of people who aren't going to vote for Donald Trump, just sort of dismiss it. So I think this stuff really does backfire. If you look at what Trump said, he was saying there's going to be a bloodbath in the auto industry if he loses. I happen to agree with him, Hugh. But whether you agree or disagree, at least be honest and report what the guy actually said.
I couldn't agree more. And I also agree that the fanaticism with which the attacks are coming against the former president is going to help him, Senator Vance. And I know you follow the polls. Joe Biden is down at 38%. It's pretty hard to get to 38%. I mean, you got to work at it. And he kept it up with the State of the Union. Were you in there, by the way? Did he yell at you for an hour and a half? Were you in there?
No, I was not. I skipped that. I decided it was going to be a hyper-political speech, and I took the Antonin Scalia approach and just said, you know what, I've got better things to do. So I did not go, and I was based on the speech, I was right to be there, not be there. Look, the crazy thing, Hugh, is the Democrats are starting to panic about his poll numbers. And you may have seen this story come out yesterday where Biden himself is starting to get irritated and angry because they just won't budge. They won't budge because people are actually frustrated about the state of the country. Larry Summers, who is a former Obama administration economist, not a Republican by any means, he actually sort of came out with this very interesting study, or at least he was posting about it yesterday, that basically walks through the ways in which current inflation measures are undervaluing increases in mortgage payments, increases in car payments, that are really hitting Americans where they hurt. So people aren't happy with the economy. They're not going to be brought to Joe Biden by hysterically misrepresenting what Donald Trump said.
Now, the other thing that I'm worried about is that they're going to force the Fed, they being the White House, are going to jawbone the Fed into lowering interest rates too early. And I'm not a fan of interest rates that are artificially high. But the money supply drives inflation, J.D. Vance. You know that. I'm sure they taught that at Yale Law School, right? They taught it at The Ohio State University. I'm sure they taught it in the Marine Corps. But too much money means inflation. And Joe Biden just spent all the money. And now we've got this hanging over us, and there's no way to get rid of it until you reduce the money supply.
Yeah, you don't want the Fed to become politicized. And I have the same theory you do, Hugh. If you look at the inflation numbers that came out just last week, inflation just is persistently high, and economists keep on telling us that it's going to dip back around that 2% threshold, and it's just stubbornly high because I think the economy is just still not in a place where you can bring down that inflation number. So if the Fed, I think, artificially lowered interest rates, what it would do is maybe make the inflation problem worse. Now, Biden is, of course, wanting them to do that because he thinks it'll help them politically. I'm not sure if the Fed throws more fuel on the fire of inflation, whether it will actually help Joe Biden politically. I don't know that anything will help him. People just remember, the mainstream media, you know this, they call it Trump amnesia. The argument is that people forget how bad things were in the Trump administration. I remember how good things were in the Trump administration. I remember the fact that we didn't have wars in multiple places in the world. I remember that we had low inflation and rapidly rising wages, especially for folks on the bottom. Like, things were pretty good when Donald Trump was president. People remember that, and I think they're going to reward him with a victory in November because of it.
JD, I'm well off. I'm a 1%er, but I went to the market yesterday because the fetching Mrs. Hewitt is staying behind in California for another week. So I had to get milk and bagel. I mean, like nothing. But I walked up to the Safeway. $60 for like nothing. And I thought, how in the world are Americans making it? Do you hear this all the time, whether it's at a Bernie rally or wherever you're out on the street?
No, we hear this all the time. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about Bernie Moreno is because he's an outsider and he's going to bring a fresh perspective to Washington, and he understands how the economy works. And yeah, if you go to the grocery store, if you talk to people who are shopping, a lot of moms and dads who are worried about prices. But it's not just at the grocery store, Hugh. I mean, car payments, cars are way more expensive than they were even 5 years ago. Home payments are absolutely through the roof. I have a young guy on my staff who's a young family looking to start fresh, buying a house, and it is crazy to me what these guys are paying for starter homes as young Americans. If you can't expect young Americans to be able to afford a home, people aren't going to be happy with the economy, and they're not.
Yeah, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I bought our first home in 1985, and the mortgage rate on it was 12.5%. But the home cost $80,000. That's not the case anymore, and it's just impossible. Jay, let me talk to you about Ukraine while I've got you.
Sure.
You and I disagree about Ukraine. I agree with Senator Cotton. Send only weapons. Just plus up the defense budget and send weapons. That's not what Joe Biden is asking for. I don't want to send any aid for their bureaucrats. I don't want to pay for their pension. I just want to send weapons. What do you say about the Cotton proposal?
Well, look, I like Tom, obviously respect him a ton, and he's one of the smartest people in Washington and in any party or any chamber. But we do disagree on this. My basic argument, Hugh, is we don't have enough weapons to send. And I think we have to get really serious and acknowledge our own limitations. The reports are coming out of Israel, and, of course, we were seeing this in classified context months ago, that they are running low on ammunition. The Ukrainians are obviously running low on ammunition. The Taiwanese are not getting the things that we need to send them so that they can deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. God forbid if the Chinese make that move. We cannot support all of these theaters simultaneously with the industrial base in the condition that it's in. So I think you and I agree we should rebuild that industrial base. But while we're in the position that we are, we have to pick and choose. I just don't think Ukraine meets the threshold of America's core interest right now, especially when you compare it to what's going on in East Asia and in the Middle East.
Do you think Putin will stop in Ukraine if he succeeds in breaking through those lines, or will he go into the Baltics and Poland? And if the latter is true, don't we have to send troops?
Well, I do not think that he'll go into Poland, Hugh. I don't think that he has the capacity to if he wants to. I won't pretend to know Vladimir Putin's motivations. But I think his capacity for war is relatively limited. I don't think, for what it's worth, Hugh, that he can go even into the western part of Ukraine. They don't have the manpower to govern a territory that large and that resistant. What I think is going to eventually happen is that Ukraine will probably lose 20% of their 1991 territory. That's not a good thing, by the way, Hugh. I'm not condoning the invasion, but I think this is the real world of limitations that we're living in, and we have to accept it.
Well, I think the Reagan doctrine, I'm a student of the Reagan administration. Help your friends. Ukraine is a friend. They're not a treaty ally. And kill as many Russians as they send over the line. It's World War I now. It's just going to be a war of attrition. The Russians probably can win that without the artillery shells. But we agree on rebuilding the industrial base. Let me ask you about the president's defense budget, a 0.9% increase. JD, that is so far below inflation that I can't imagine any senator supporting that.
No, it's way too low, Hugh, and also, I mean, we have to really get into the weeds about how we procure weapons and equipment in the United States military. I think that we have to do a lot better there. The Chinese are building ships for about a quarter of the cost that it takes an American to build a ship, and some of that is labor, Hugh, but most of that is actually not labor. Most of that is just that we have broken supply chains, and we have to fix this stuff if we're going to stay ahead of our competitors for the next century. So, yeah, it's not enough money, and there's not enough real evaluation of how to make the procurement process better so that we can really win the next century. I really worry about this, Hugh, that the Chinese have very smartly invested, not just in manufacturing capacity, but in minerals and relationships all over the world. They've developed the logistics networks, the supply chains. We really have been outplayed by them for decades now, and I think.
Oh my goodness, we just got thrown out of Niger, J.D. Vance, and that's because the Chinese are there.
The Chinese are there, and of course Joe Biden is president, and why is the president playing a positive role here? It's another reason why I think we need Donald Trump back in